Okay, welcome back to a new quick episode of Military Retirement Live. Scott Tucker here with Gary Redman. And what I wanted to talk about, Gary, is I, you know, the inflation is in the news, right? You're out in California. Is it real? Is it like they say? Is it $8 a gallon? Like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna survive? We never
Yeah.
knew it could possibly happen like this, except for I'm sitting here going, I lived in Europe for 11 years. And
Yeah.
yes, there was a time where you play the whole ESO card game and try to get, or you buy gas on base. When I
Yeah.
was active duty, I got to do that. But when I got out and I was in the reserves, but I couldn't use the ESO card system. I couldn't get the free gas, so I was paying gas on the economy. When the euro was at 160 to the dollar, I was paying the equivalent of about 11, $12 a gallon for gas.
Yeah.
And guess what? You eventually kind of like, this is the cost of my mortgage. You
Yeah.
get used to things, and part of all this inflation stuff, I
Yep.
think, is a smokescreen. How they describe, oh, it's such a bad thing. Of course it's technically bad if it's a shock and we're not expecting the payment for it.
Yeah.
But it allows the people that are causing the problem to then jump in and also say, well, guess what, we have the greatest solution for the problem that we just caused, as so often happens, right? So I mean, yeah, what are you seeing out there?
No, it's the same. It's the same. It resonates with everybody else. And the big one I see from the mortgage industry is everybody is asking me every day, like, hey, when are mortgage rates coming down? I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
historically, I don't know if you're ever going to see the rates back in the twos and even low threes again. Because if you remember, I bought my first piece of property in 2005. I have an interest rate on that property at 5.6%. And at that point, that was a heck of a deal. It wasn't that bad. And so I think people are very short minded in the sense of the 2 years that we had where mortgage rates were so low, and now they're starting to come back up, and people are in the same mindset of, oh, I'm just going to wait until they come back down. I don't think they're coming back down.
Yeah, did you see yesterday? Yesterday, they kind of like under the table. It sounded like, or behind closed doors, it sounded like the Fed was, or Reserve Board members, however they're defined,
Yeah.
we're talking about uh, raising it by half a basis point. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
like,
right. Yeah. So
I guess that'll be
there's
interesting.
people I talk to in the industry that now I don't know. I mean, and this is obviously not the honest truth, but people predict it could go to 6 to 7% by the end of the year, and then taper back down a little bit next year, but not to the 2.5% that we enjoyed in 2021 and 2022
Were you the one
or
saying?
early.
Were you the one saying that your dad laughs because of the high interest rates? Was that you?
No, I don't think that
Oh,
was me.
oh
Yeah.
no, no. Okay, I know what it was. I was talking to a client, and he was talking about his dad back in
No.
the '80s. Basically took out a business loan or took out a real estate loan to buy some condos. Took out like $1 million, or however much he needed back then to buy some property, to rent them out, to be a landlord. And he happily paid 18% interest.
That's what I
Happily,
say, 15 to
right?
18%.
and
Yeah.
and, and so he said his dad just laughs at everybody when they're like, oh my god, it's going to go up to 6%.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of context around the inflation thing. Again, not that it's definitely not a problem. It is, because it is quick and can be shocking.
Yeah.
It can get a lot worse quickly. Hyperinflation's a real thing, and honestly, I don't know what the answer is to that, other than you're supposed to spend your money as quickly as you can. And it's like, so when's that threshold? Who makes that call? Um, but so I thought the idea here was, I was generally curious, like, actually, how does everybody see cola? I mean, it should be, they see it as inflation adjustment. So yes, correct. Technically this is correct.
Yeah.
But and technically all these things are correct. And the one that might, it just depends how you frame it, right? And that's kind of my point is, we're reframing it as, oh, don't worry, you have an inflation adjustment. So it doesn't matter what the inflation is because we'll just adjust it for you, or cost of
Yeah.
living adjustment, right? And they even redefine it. It's like, it's an inflation or is it cost of living? It's so that, that other,
Yeah.
add one more level of complexity or confusion, or just now I got to know another definition. Was it the same thing or
Yeah.
not? Right. And so they go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting a benefit. And then we drive on. And that's how we tend to ignore these things. So, I kind
And
of was pointing this out in the white paper about the military retirement pay and a survivor benefit plan. Is one of the things that gets searched a lot is, hey, is what's my retirement pay
yeah,
cola, right? What is my military retirement pay cola? What is it each year? And so it's all based on the consumer price indexes, which is how they supposedly look at inflation, but those rules change all the time.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's a lot of economists out there and say none of these numbers are actually accurate. Things like unemployment numbers determining what it is. But
Right.
eh, my point was just simply, what if if cola is considered here? I'll just read it. First, a quick, what about cola? First, a quick red pill. COLA is sold as a pay increase the government offers in the form of an inflation adjustment. We assume this is a benefit because inflation is a tax you don't see, but it's still a tax, right? So, that's the thing is we understand the idea of paying taxes on our money today, but the whole reason we're paying taxes is because we're funding some sort of government thing, right? And oftentimes, if the government doesn't take the money from taxes, they what do? They get a loan or they
Yeah.
print it, and essentially, even if they're printing it, it's still technically a version of a loan. They got to pay interest on it, and so since there's always going to be payments of interest on those loan amounts that are supposed to pay for things in the future, well, that's what causes the inflation. It causes prices to go up, and so as prices go up, it's it's still a tax. It's still taking away from the value of what otherwise would have been your dollar. So whether they're taking it up front as a tax or inflating the value of the dollar away, and we always show those charts of the value of the dollar over the last 100 years, it's basically worth like, I don't know, less than 10% of what it was 100 years ago. So
Wow.
that's what that's what I'm saying. So when they say cola, really it's just a tax rebate, right? Because you're getting taxed from the price increase, and then they just give you a little something to cover it up, right? So rather than a direct tax rebate that you get at the end of the year, at the end of at the end of your tax returns, that's the direct that's the rebate to make you feel not so bad about the
Yeah.
taxes you paid. That's what I think cola should be properly looked at. Like, hey, great, glad we got it. Glad there's some sort of system in place that isn't have to be doesn't have to be tied to the stock market, right? Because
Right.
that's the problem with the traditional retirement model. When it got away from the pension system in the 70s, more and more people were having to have self responsibility for their retirement savings, and the
Yeah.
only way to beat the inflation was, for the most part, to put the money at risk in the stock market. So yeah, we can get 7-8% over time in the S&P 500, and definitely beat inflation in a nominal sense. Except for, what if, like my dad, the year he wanted to retire was 2008,
Yeah.
and he kind of had to take some side extra gigs, because he's like, well, I wanted it to bounce back before he, you know, dabbled into his retirement savings.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the sequence of events can have a big impact on
Yeah.
ultimately what is the required cost of a living adjustment, right? Because ultimately that's going to be down to you
Right.
anyways. So I just don't
Well,
want to get too reliant on, we're going to get a little bit of extra 1 or 2% this year. It's like, it's
right.
really not that much. We can maybe take a little bit more control and not worry about it. It's like, whatever we get, bonus.
Yeah. I almost equate it to almost like the base housing allowance, right? Like it's all kind of based on, and I agree with you. I don't know how the math works out or how they figure it out, but it's all really based on how much people are willing to pay for those goods or products, right? Like you see rent skyrocketing throughout the country and in different locations. And I look at BAH, especially there in Virginia Beach, Pensacola, and even out here in California. Now the military, the DoD markets the fact that, like, hey, that BAH is only supposed to cover about 75% of your living expenses. Well, in a lot of cases, it's not even covering that right now because people are willing to pay for housing because there is supply and demand. There's only about 250 to 300,000 houses on the market nationwide at any given time right now. So people are willing to pay more for it. So if you can't buy a house, rents are going up, but people are renting because there's more renters. So like cost of living doesn't equate for that supply and demand piece of it. Same with BH.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious right now that big corporations are taking advantage of this, and they're
100%.
able to because of the inflation. So what has the inflation infected? The value of assets,
Yeah.
not just the cost of goods, but the value of assets. So
Yeah.
who holds all the assets? The banks and the big corporations, right? So their assets inflated exponentially more than even the people who did well. Oh, my retirement account did well. Not as well as those guys. We're
Yeah.
all, all shucks, the billionaires. It's like, well, okay, but um, eh, you know, I mean, Elon, their values like just doubled and tripled, and I don't even follow it anymore.
I
It's
mean,
kind of
it's
gotten
scary to
hilarious.
me. And I was having a conversation with somebody about this the other day. It's scary to me that some of these investment companies, specifically, and not to talk bad about, we talk about BlackRock a lot, but they are buying equity stakes in people's homes
Well,
because
exactly.
people
Yeah.
won't act. So to me, that is scary for outside entities, especially whether they're in New York, San Francisco, to come in and buy an outside stake in an individual's home is it's alarming a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's probably just a different version of all the credit default swaps that they
Yeah.
made a movie about. That was fun to watch. It's like,
The Big Short, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like it's make a funny kind of like, oh, we're angry, but it's all
Yeah.
happy go lucky.
Yeah.
Like oh, these guys were total crooks and stuff.
Yeah.
But girl in a bathtub with wine explaining it to make it cute. For
Yeah.
all us idiots out there. So
Yeah, for sure.
at the same time, it was useful way to get the message across. Nobody did anything. It's not like
No.
anybody's really complaining. I mean, there's a
Nope.
little bit of protests at Wall Street, but that
Yeah.
went away quick, and we moved on to the next thing. But I don't
Yeah.
think people understand the financial dilemma we're in on a number of different fronts that maybe just kind of work themselves out. But it's clear that they're trying to reset some things but who knows what market that's going to affect or whatever. But you always hear throughout, if we're all supposed to be students of history as warriors, right? Why aren't we students of financial history?
Yeah.
We study Sun Tzu and in the Art of War and all the I've read all the great books.
Yeah.
Clausewitz, people talk about Clausewitz. Oh, I love
Yeah.
Clausewitz. It's like,
Very hard to read.
yeah, it's like great. War
Yeah.
is politics by other means. Like,
Yep.
okay, we could just justify killing people. I get it, but it's just as bad in the financial and business world,
Yeah.
and there's a history to it. The word oligarch, like that's just depending on which side you're on.
Yeah.
We call them business magnates. The other side will call them oligarchs and vice versa. Like, what's the difference between the impact that people at the turn of the 19th century had, or the 20th? How do you say that? Is it 20? When you say the turn of the 20th century, is that 2000 or 1900?
I think I equate that as the 1900 because
The
that
18 to
would
the
be like
1900s.
20
Either
would
way,
be,
those
yeah.
guys, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, they were like way richer than I think the equivalent of what a Bezos or an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates
Yeah.
is. But they could have a pretty big impact back then. Not like these guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are just the big names we know of versus the big conglomerates. Much like the real study we should do here, both study of war and finance
Yeah.
and business. What's the one thing in all of history we should be studying for global domination or just impacting other countries? The
Money.
East India Company.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know how they worked? They were a private corporation that
Yeah.
was given charters to essentially colonize, have armies, and wage war.
Yeah.
But they were a corporation, right? And so how is it no different than what we're doing now in a cyberspace?
Yeah.
And to some extent, all aspects of media and even medical. It's just the amount of money involved in corporate power is just fascinating.
Yeah.
And if we're always thinking about global strategic shape the battle space, and now we've got cyber warfare and space warfare, it's like, don't forget the East India Company when you're reading your Sun Tzu, people.
Yeah. I mean, it amazes me.
If you talk about inflation, I'm sure there was a bunch of impacts that
Yeah.
played into that back then.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, the influence that a single person like Elon Musk has on a single stock. I don't know. I read something. Elon Musk came out with something, right, and Twitter's stock shot up 25%. He said something, and I don't know the quote on what he said or what he
No, he
engaged.
bought 10%.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's
Yeah,
what he did
so
that, and it
it
just
went up.
shot up. But the influence he's had on crypto and different kind of stocks throughout the last year, just based on tweets he's made or different comments, I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Like instantaneous gratification, and the stock just shoots up or loses
Yeah.
a lot of value at the same time. I mean, that to me is the scariest piece of it. Is like you have no control over this person's actions, yet it's influencing markets on a major level.
Yeah, that's just the kind of upfront stuff, because we have no. I mean, just fiber optics alone with the speed of trading is a big impact. But well, cool. No, I think that was a fun, you
Yeah,
know, just again trying to think about these typical terms we always hear about in the military: COLA, TSP, LES. Like, all right, let's look into it just a little deeper and see if there's another perspective of
yeah,
this. So that was the idea today. If you are interested in checking out the white paper, we're going to have different versions coming out. I currently have an '06 and an E9 edition. And that's just specific to the numbers that we talk about in the plan. But either way, if you would like your rank, that'll be the one I'll do next. So hit me up,
yeah.
but you'll get a pretty good idea. So if folks want to read this, I'll have it up on the website soon, or you can hit me up as well. Oh, I thought I was sharing my screen, but anyways, no big deal. But all
Yeah,
right,
let's see that. Let's save that for Tuesday, man. That was an exciting discussion we had pre-show. I'll save that in my brain until Tuesday, and I want to run through the numbers. I mean, the white paper I thought was great, and just digging into the numbers are actually pretty exciting.
cool. No, that's the idea there, because it's like when you see the numbers and you realize
Yeah,
this is not a few $100 a month; it's
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of dollars. The point is, and that's just one officer or one senior NCO. Now
yep,
imagine that extrapolated between all the people that are retiring every year, and then a lot of, I call it opportunity cost.
yes,
It's
yeah,
just it's money we're kind of throwing at something. It's not even a gamble; it's a maybe. And if there is a better way, don't you want to at least know about it?
yeah,
And I think if we can reposition those assets that otherwise would be going up to Uncle Sam, if they don't need to be, let's keep them in the veteran family's hand to
yeah.
potentially reinvest it, grow it. I don't know, enjoy life more if it doesn't need to be, just sent one way. So
I
okay,
mean, it's
cool.
funny. I had a conversation too. So I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. I was like, how can anything worth having is hard, right? Well, it is harder to opt out of SBP than to opt into it. Like think of that. Like it's hard. So I mean,
Well,
it's just
Congress mandated.
right. So
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes you question mark, Wayne, is this thing actually good for me if it's harder for me to get out of it than to get into it? So
Right. Well, cool. All right, everybody. We will see you next week.